Can you hear me now? All right. If you can hear me, go ahead and put something in the chat for me so that way I know. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I think you can. Okay. If you can't hear me, please put something in the chat so that way I know. My mic keeps shutting off. So as long as this stays connected, we're just going to. Hopefully that one. Can you hear me now? All right. Let's go ahead and see if we can get this thing started. I just want to make sure all the links are working here. Looks like it is. Sorry, we're still getting used to this whole online streaming, and so you have to bear with me as I get this all figured out. Okay, I think the mic is working. Everything is good. So hopefully you can hear me. Welcome to week 2 of No BS Homebuyer Live. We are going to be doing this every Tuesday at 6 p.m. And I promise as I get more used to this, it will get better. These intros won't be so long. And the replay, I promise I'll cut this out. So welcome back. For every Tuesday at 6 p.m., we're going to be doing about 15 minutes and walking through real actionable parts of the home buying process without confusion or without pressure, so that way you feel confident and comfortable being able to buy a home this year. So last week, we created the 2026 home ownership roadmap, which was a step-by-step plan to getting to home ownership. And really what it was a goal and mindset catered type of document. So that way you could really kind of figure out where you're at in the process, why you want to buy a house, and a couple simple next steps to take. So that way you can take actionable steps to achieve your goal. Now, what we learned last week is that home ownership isn't just one giant leap. It is a series of little intentional steps to get you there. And so today we're going to be talking about some of the things that keep people stuck before they even start. So we're going to bust some myths and definitely talk about some little things to get you started and keep you going in your home ownership buying journey. And we really want to help eliminate that belief that home ownership is farther away, because it's really not if you're doing the right things. So oftentimes I hear people say, I don't make enough money. I'll never be able to save enough. I'll have to save forever. But the truth is, too many of these assumptions and thoughts on money are all based on myths and not facts, and you're not even looking at the right information as to what you need to be saving. So let's just start with probably the biggest myth is that you need 20% down for a down payment. This is the biggest excuse of, oh, I don't have 20%, I'm never going to be able to buy a house. Well, the truth of the matter is most people aren't actually putting down 20%. It's just a common recommendation. You probably get the best interest rates and all of that stuff with 20% down, but it's not required. And to be quite honest, most, if not all of my first-time home buyers have never put 20% down. So, and I've been in the business since 2018. So don't let that be the myth that automatically pushes you out of even thinking about home ownership. So the real data shows that typically for a down payment across the US, this is every home buyer, not just first-time home buyers, but first-time home buyers, move-up buyers, people that own a house and they're selling a house and putting that equity towards it. Across the board in the US, most of those sales are putting down on average 19%. So not even the average sale is doing 20%. So let's just look at that in terms of like an average home price. Let's do 400,000. If we're looking all US, that's probably pretty median. So that's $75,000 to $80,000 down is what people have been putting down at 19%. But for first-time home buyers, which is what a lot of you will be, is closer to 8 to 10%. And again, personally, I have seen that be even less through my clients. So on that same $400,000 home, you're looking at $36,000 down. So that's a lot more doable than 75 to 80,000. It's still a big chunk of money, but it's much easier to comprehend at that interest or that much down, that down payment. So let's just kind of take a moment and recognize that that's a lot less cash than you initially thought you needed up front, making home ownership a lot closer to within reach. And as a first-time buyer, there are tons of programs that make this even more doable, even less than that 8 to 10%. There are mortgages where you can put down as low as 3%, or 3.5 is common. The 3.5 one is a very common one known as the FHA loan. That is where you put 3.5% down if you have a 580 credit score or better. If you were lower than that, they typically want like 10% down. And then actually conventional programs will allow you to go down to 3%, which is even less than 3.5, obviously. And they have a little fewer restrictions. In most cases, if you're doing a 3% conventional down loan, it makes sense to bump up to the 5% just for your interest rate and payments. Most lenders are going to bump you to the 5%. On our house, we actually did a 5% down conventional loan. We wanted to put as little money as we could into the actual property, but the numbers at 3% just didn't make sense. It made more sense at 5%. And then there are programs that you can do 0% down. Those would be VA. So if you're a veteran and can qualify for a VA loan, that can be a 0% down loan. And then also a USDA loan, which doesn't require you to be a veteran, but it does require you to live outside of like big municipalities. There's a whole map online that you can look at if you're looking in whatever state you live in. So there are properties that you can do 0% down through USDA loan. And then also locally, it's worth checking with different lenders. Like right now, I'm working with a lender that has a program that the buyer only has to bring 1% down. And in Nebraska, locally, we have NIFA loans, which they only require $1,000 to go into the transaction. So there are lots of different options. You can bust that myth of 20% down as your down payment. Obviously, the more down, the better your payment is going to be. But that shouldn't be the thing stopping you from considering homeownership. Which then brings us to savings. So once people really start focusing on, I can't save, there's no way I could save that much, I don't think they're asking the right question. I think the real question is, are my current habits aligned with my goals? So can you save? Absolutely you can. Is your goal to truly buy a house? If it is, you'll look at your savings and what you're spending, and you'll really align those things to make it happen. Some really cool tools to make that work are, there's anything to track your savings or to track your spending, excuse me. I personally like Monarch Money. I haven't used them yet. Again, they bought out Mint, which is what I used to track all my spending with. But I have heard great things about the transition. So they are really good for inputting your accounts, and then they can track all your accounts, and they use AI to kind of tally out what goes to what. So you can see how much you're spending on coffee versus how much you're spending on groceries, your insurance, and all of that stuff. And it's just a really good tracking tool, so that way you can look monthly and realign and say, hey, I went and spent $300 at Starbucks this month. I didn't really get that much enjoyment out of it. I have a coffee machine at home. I would rather put that money in towards my house savings, so that way I can buy a house, because I value my peace and freedom more than I do my coffee. My Starbucks coffee. Don't get me wrong, we're still going to drink our coffee. But if you're interested in Monarch Money, I listen to a podcast called Bigger Pockets Money, and they have a code that can get you 50% off your first year. And I think it's like $100 for the year, so $50. Their code is POCKETS, POCKETS. So that would give you 50% off for that. Other ones that I've come across, and I don't know price on this one, is You Need a Budget, or YNAB. That is another one. I think it's mostly like an Excel sheet, but in an app kind of type of thing. You can also make your own Excel sheet if you're really crafty at that, and we'll look at that. That's a great way to do it. Or if you are a pen and paper kind of person, if it's effective and you're going to do it and track it, use it. Pen and paper will work just fine. It doesn't matter how expensive your tool is. The only thing that matters is that you're using it, tracking your spending, making educated decisions on what you do want to be spending on, and how you're putting that towards your savings goal for your down payment, any renovation costs, and all the things that go with buying a house. And total side note, but when you are saving for a house, I would not put it in a regular savings account like at your local bank. I would be putting it in a high yield savings account, so you're at least getting better interest rates than 0.5%. I think when we moved to an Ally online account, I think we were at like 5%. I think it's like 4.5% right now or something like that. But it's a lot better than the 0.5% I was getting at my local bank. And that money is accessible for when we want to buy another property or use it for whatever we're saving for. And you can kind of bucket things out, which is kind of fun too. So you could have a down payment bucket, you could have a renovations bucket, all these fun things, and a going on vacation after you buy a house bucket. Anyway, let's go to another common misconception or a big belief problem, thinking that your credit has to be perfect. You do not need an 800 credit score to buy a house. Is it going to benefit you if you have one? Yes, I'm not going to lie to you. The better the credit score, the better your interest rate. However, you don't need spotless credit. Like I said, the FHA program required a 580 credit score. So if you can be above that, you're looking pretty and sitting pretty. If you don't have any kind of credit, that will hurt you, but it's easy to build credit within 6 months. And honestly, if you're just starting on the process, just thinking about buying a house, you're probably going to need that 6 months for savings anyway. So start building your credit, get a credit card or a secured line of credit, and just use it and pay it off every month. And that will help you establish some credit. So that way a lender can look at that. There are ways to work around someone not having any credit, but it's much easier if you just have some established credit. Like we said, the big myth is that you have to have perfect credit. You do not. It just typically means that you're going to get a little better interest rates if your credit is better. One tip that I really like to give people is to be sure to be talking to the lender, because sometimes they can kind of be a credit coach for you. So I know people get really scared getting pre-approved because they're like, oh, it's going to hit my credit really hard. It's normally like a max of 10 points for a couple of weeks, and it goes right back. So even just getting your pre-approval it's not gonna drop you ridiculously. Obviously, don't be pulling out new credit cards and doing all the things, because then that will drop you. But doing one hard pull isn't gonna make or break you. But then the lender can look at all of your history, look at your credit score, what it's comprised of, and say, hey, this, maybe this is inaccurate. You should argue this. Or, hey, it looks like you've been using more credit than you probably should. Can you pay some of this down and continue to reduce your credit utilization? And that should help build up your score for when you are ready to buy. So make sure you're talking to the lender and using them for the resources that they are, because they want to help you improve your credit, because you're more likely to buy a house and use them to buy the loan. So let's talk about a couple quick credit improvement tips. I just want to check my time and see kind of how long I am keeping you. Okay. So credit improvement tips is pull your reports, check for errors. If there are errors, please call them. Make sure you're trying to get those off. pay down high interest rate cards first, just so you're one, paying less interest and just making it look better. Maintain your credit utilization under 30%. So if you have $10,000 worth of credit, don't spend anything over $3,000 or keep a balance beyond $3,000. That can really help boost your score. Keep older accounts open. So if you got a credit card in college, where they're at the table and you get a free shirt for signing up for a card, keep that one open if that's your first card, even if you don't use it or you only use it one time a year, just to keep it open, because credit history length is really important. And if you close that card, then you lose that history. And then don't open a bunch of new accounts right before applying. And little things like this can make a measurable difference in your credit in 60 or 90 days. Just being consistent and making sure that you're doing that. And if you need a credit repair company, I like My Credit Guy. I can send you a referral if that's something you need to look at, especially if you've got some medical debt and different debt that hasn't been written off. And then let's talk about monthly payments. A lot of people get really concerned about monthly payments, and actually that's where the lenders are going to be most concerned too, is what you can actually afford monthly. So this is kind of just an estimated, you're going to buy a $150,000 home. Your principal and interest is probably going to be around $950 at a 6.5% interest rate. Now that's only principal and interest. That doesn't include taxes and insurance. In the state I am in, those are high for both. So the next column over is the estimated total monthly payment, including all of those things. Just rounded up at a 30% is kind of how I came up with those numbers. But you can kind of get an idea. Say you're paying $2,000 in rent, you're probably looking at about a $250,000 house. So it's kind of nice to be able to quick compare what you're renting for currently and what you would be able to buy. So I want you to be able to walk away today with some more information on what you think you should need based on real numbers, not on myths and just not on all the hearsay of, I'll never be able to afford a house because I'm a millennial and they're not priced. And we don't need to play into all that. We need to look at our actual numbers and compare what's realistic and understand your options, the programs, and the calculations. So I have made a little rent to buy worksheet that you can go through your monthly rent, go through your ownership, find a house that you like in a neighborhood you like, wherever you are, kind of put those numbers in just so you can get an idea. I like to use homes.com. Their calculator is pretty seamless. And then you can just compare them here. And then after you go through those things, kind of think about how you feel, what you ran with those numbers. Is that aligned with your long-term goal? If you're going to move to Florida next week because it's warmer down there and it's cold where you're at, probably don't need to buy a house right now. So just make sure everything is lining up. And I will post this in the group. So if you want this, just reach out to me to make sure you are a part of the group. I'd love to see your sheet done. And if you want to walk through your numbers specifically, book a call with me and we can go ahead and do that. Next week, we are going to have some of these more in depth. I'm maybe going to see if I can get a lender on with me to kind of give an example of renting versus buying with actual numbers. So thank you for joining me today. And I hope these were some good tips and helped you realize that homeownership really isn't that far away. You just really need to align your actions with your goals. Well, I will see you next week, and thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.